Hello everybody. I just wanted to go over very quickly what we're doing. Today we are going to be going through our PowerPoint number 1 for Chinese philosophy. Now this is a very short PowerPoint, so this will be a fairly short video. Instead of spending your time writing down what you see on the slides, I have made you Cornell notes. This is where you have to the left on your table you have the PowerPoint or the Google Slides typed material, and then you have this section over here for your own notes. And you can either print this out and handwrite it, or you can save a copy to your drive by going to File, Make a Copy, and then saving it to your drive for your notes if you want to upload it through or take your notes through typing. This is going to be posted in the Schoology page. I haven't posted it yet because I didn't want to concern y'all. I want to make this lecture first. So basically, this is the first lecture series for this week, and we're going to get started. Now, you may have already read in the instructions that I talk a little bit about something called context. Now, context is just short for contextualization. What that means is background information. For instance, if I want to know about your background, let's say you are right now a freshman in Lamp High School. Well, what happened before you were a freshman in Lamp High School? Well, before you were a 9th grader, you were an 8th grader. So you might want to set the stage by introducing yourself to me by saying, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. I came from Johnny Carr last year. I've spent my entire time in the magnet program," or maybe you came in during middle school or during elementary school, maybe 3rd grade, just to give a little background information to set the stage for who you are as a 9th grader. Okay, it's kind of like when you watch an episode of a TV show, not on Netflix, but an episode of a TV show, and you have to wait every week for it to come out. Well, before you get into the new episode, it'll typically give you a recap of what happened on the last episode. That's all context is. We're getting background information to help set us up for the key information. And so this PowerPoint is going to cover Chinese philosophy. There are 3 main philosophies that you're going to need to know from this PowerPoint. Confucianism, which is not a religion. That's very important to note. Not a religion. Taoism, another philosophy that focuses very heavily on nature. And legalism, a very strict and often brutal philosophy that was used by the Qin dynasty in China. So like I said before, contextualization or context is just background information. So what was going on in China during the classical era? With the classical era being between 600 CE, which y'all may be used to BCE versus CE by now. You may have been familiar with BC versus AD. Okay, instead of saying BC for before Christ, we say BCE, before Common Era. Okay, so everything before the year 0 is BCE, before Common Era. Everything after the year 0 isn't AD or Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, or some people mistake it for after death. Instead, it is CE for Common Era. So everything prior to the year 0 is before the Common Era. Everything after the year 0 is the Common Era. Okay, so what is the background information going into China? Well, prior to the development of these philosophies, you have an animistic belief. Okay, so animism is the belief that elements of nature can help guide the living. So this belief that natural objects like a tree or the sun or a river could have an impact on you as a living being. So you may be familiar with this with the context of the Native Americans in American history. If you've ever seen the movie Pocahontas from Disney, it could be on Disney Plus right now, I don't know, but she sings about painting with the colors of the wind and basically this idea of a spirit guide. Okay, so this is what animism is. It's this belief in natural objects having supernatural powers. Also within that, you have something called ancestor veneration. Okay, so this is very important. You need to know that they have an animistic belief system, animism, where natural objects in the world have supernatural forces, and that ancestor veneration was a part of Chinese culture in the pre-classical era. Okay, veneration, to venerate, means to respect highly. So this is honoring the souls of the dead. You also had shamanism, which is basically the idea that there are people who are very attentive to the spirit world, and thus they can serve as spirit guides in the real world, so they can mediate connections between the earth and the spirit world. So basically someone telling your fortune, or being able to connect with the dead and have them communicate with you. That would be what shamans are in this school of thought. So as the early Chinese empire starts forming through these different dynasties, you're going to see these schools of thought evolve. Now, Confucianism is the biggest continuity in Chinese history. What does continuity mean? Well, what does the word continue mean? Okay, well, to continue means to go on for a long time. So this means that Confucianism is one of the most constant features of Chinese history. When we talk about China, we are going to have to talk about Confucianism, whether it's early China or middle China, or if we talk about the Middle Kingdom with the Tang Dynasty, or if it's present-day China, you are going to have to address the long-lasting influence of Confucianism. So if you're taking notes right now, that's exactly what I would write down in big capital letters. Confucianism is the major continuity in Chinese history. It dominates in terms of its influence in China, which is interesting since Confucianism is not a religion. It is a philosophy. Thus, you're going to see, this is very significant, because there's not a dominant religion in China, other religions are going to be able to spread without as much hassle. And you're going to see Buddhism becomes very, very popular in China, despite the fact that it started in India. And that has a more of an idea of, oh, there are gods, or there's a heaven, or there's some sort of quote-unquote afterlife, such as in reincarnation. Okay, so it's because of the fact that these are philosophies, not religions, that you're going to see that religions are able to expand into China, most notably Buddhism. Okay, Taoism has to deal more with nature and equality, or basically balance in the world, and legalism is very, very strict, very, very brutal. So let's go ahead and get into Confucianism. Confucianism is going to focus more on your behavior in everyday life. Okay, what is the philosophy by which you live your life? It's not going to focus so much on gods. Okay, so under Confucianism, Confucius, he's the founder of Confucianism, but he is not a god. They do not worship Confucius as a god. Instead, he is a very famous philosopher who grew up very poor and so traveled around a lot, basically just going from place to place because he didn't have any roots or anything tying him down, and he just started thinking really hard about stuff. And it's basically like if Instagram had been around in the past, you know, in 400 or so BCE, let's say Confucius starts an Instagram and then he starts posting these stories with these inspirational quotes. Basically, Confucianism is one of the very first influencers. Okay, he becomes very, very famous because of his thoughts about our individual role in life and how that relationship between us and the government is developed. All of these ideas are going to be compiled into a book known as the Analects by his followers, and thus his ideas are going to spread. Because his ideas are saved and written down, they're going to continue to spread and influence China. Now, it's important to remember that this is a political and social philosophy. Do not confuse it with a religion. Okay, some of the philosophical tidbits that you can get from Confucius includes, it does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. So what does that mean? It means that as long as you keep going, you're doing good. Okay, so even if you're only improving by a little bit each day, that's still better than nothing. Okay, you may be going more slowly than somebody else, but you're still heading towards that end goal. Another one, choose a job you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. What does that mean? It means that you're going to enjoy what you do so much that it doesn't feel like work. Okay, so if you do something that you enjoy and you get paid for doing it, hey, that's a win-win. Although no one pays me for being on the internet or looking at memes, which I think should be addressed. Teachings of Confucianism. Major teachings include the importance of family. Family is going to be the most critical social unit, especially the relationships within the family. Essentially, the man is going to be in charge of the household. This is a very patriarchal philosophy, and that's not uncommon during this time. In fact, all of the civilizations that we're ever going to cover are patriarchal. It's just in various degrees. But essentially, throughout world history, stemming from the invention of farming and the Neolithic Revolution, meaning coming out of the Paleolithic cavemen rock ages, with the invention of farming, you start seeing the establishment of gender roles. And from there, it is just going to be a patriarchy. So when I say importance of family, who rules the family, that's going to be the eldest male. Okay, so typically the father. Another teaching includes respects for one's elders. So you're also going to have the rank of a person being determined by their age. The older you are, the more respect you get. Okay, but it also factors on your gender. So an older male will get more respect than an older female, and a younger male would get more respect than an older female. Because remember, there's that hierarchy of men over women in this society. This is also known as filial piety, where family members are subordinate to the male head of the household, which we're going to cover again in this slide, so don't worry if you didn't catch it there. Reverence for one's ancestors means that you practice ancestor veneration. That is a key component of Chinese culture at this point in time, okay, ancestor veneration. So knowing where you came from and respecting that history. And the belief that proper rituals would lead to social harmony. So there's a big focus on maintaining social harmony. And the way to do that is to stay in your lane. Essentially, you have a role in society, and as long as you fulfill that role, then society will be peaceful. So this may be familiar, the idea of a golden rule, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Basically, treat people how you would like to be treated. You're going to see that this is going to be a very common rule in the monotheistic religions that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Judaism, Christianity, Islam. They all have some iteration of the golden rule of you should treat others the way you want to be treated. Also, Confucianism is very important, very historically significant, because you are supposed to respect social hierarchies and traditions. You're not supposed to revolt against the government. You're not supposed to rebel against the dynasties. Okay? Your role as a farmer is to shut up and farm. Your role as a scholar is to shut up and read. Okay, so you have a role, and you are not supposed to rise up against your government. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say that this isn't a religion. It's more of a political and a social philosophy. Social in that it tells people where they land in society based on their gender and age, but also political in that it tries to uphold the political system that already exists by discouraging rebellion. Okay, so the focus is more on the behavior of individuals, not on gods, okay, deities. Deities plural, because we're mostly in early history talking about polytheistic religions. Polytheism meaning many gods. Theism means religion. Poly means many. The monotheistic religions that we're going to cover later include Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. They all have one God as opposed to many, like what we would see in ancient Greece or ancient Rome. Okay, all of that polytheism with ancient Greece and Rome got cut out of the new AP world curriculum, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to cover that. When it comes to Confucianism and the family is the most important unit in Chinese society. Who's the most important person in the most important unit in society? That would be the father. Okay, and this goes under filial piety, the definition of which is family members are subordinate to the male head of household. Okay, to be subordinate means that you are beneath, that you are lower in the hierarchy. You are lower in that relationship. Piety means a type of respect or worship. Like if you're a pious person, then let's say you would go to church or pray a lot, or you would be very clearly religious. Filial relates to family relationships. Okay, so it is focusing on the father being the head of the family. And part of this has to do with gender, and part of it has to do with age. Okay? The older you are, the wiser you are, and the more respect that you've earned. This also falls under ancestor veneration. The father, in his position as the head of household, often would arrange marriages of children and grandchildren, so both male and female. Typically, though, you're going to see that the sons do get access to education due to their gender, whereas women do not. Women's roles are more so constrained to the home. They're more so supposed to take care of the family, and thus they don't get access to an education. So the father decides on where the son is going to go to school and what they study, and what they're going to do when they get out of school and want to get a job. This isn't a time period where you could just say, hey, Dad, I want to go fishing and I want to be a fisherman. No, your father would tell you, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a scholar gentry. I decide what you study and I decide who you're going to be. And due to filial piety, as a son, you are not allowed to fight back and say, no, I'm an individual and I want to be an artist or a painter. No, it's not going down like that. Okay, under Confucianism, you have a role, and your role is to stay in your lane. So listen to your father as the head of the household. Women had very few rights. They remained uneducated. Okay, you are going to see an emphasis on education in Chinese society, but it's going to mostly remain in the purview of the men. Okay, the men are the ones who get jobs. The women are the ones who stay home and handle the family. Regardless of their age, they are going to be subservient to men and boys. So once again, in terms of the social hierarchy, if you're female, you're going to be lower than males, regardless of age. Married daughters tended to be treated more like servants rather than family members. You do see some light at the end of the tunnel, though, when it comes to the older you are, the more respect that you get. So at the very least, if you became a mima or you became a grandmother, you would still be greatly respected, although you would still have to fulfill your role or stay within your lane in that patriarchal society. And this is where we get into Confucianism, focusing on that relationship aspect in society. In order for society to be stable and orderly and peaceful, which is what we all want, you're going to have to meet your obligations. Okay? What does a ruler do? They rule. What does a subject do? Listens to the ruler. That's the relationship. The ruler is in charge. Does the subject have the option to rebel or to vote or to fight back? No. Because that does not maintain a stable and orderly society. As a subject, you're supposed to shut up and listen to the king. That's the relationship. In the second relationship, parent and child, who's in charge? The parent. Who listens? The child. Okay, so that relationship is the same as ruler and subject. You have one role, and that is to stay in your lane. If you're a child, don't talk back. Third role, husband and wife. Much like the ruler and the father, the husband is in control over the wife. Number 4, older brother and younger brother. So regardless of gender, this deals with age. The elder is going to be more respected and thus have more privileges, and the younger is supposed to listen and be quiet, which I know from personal experience with my younger brother did not happen with us. We were constantly fighting. So I wish I could have used this philosophy to say, hey, listen, I'm the elder, you're supposed to listen, and I'm supposed to be in charge. But that's not exactly how it went down. The last fundamental relationship is between friend and friend. So you may notice that whereas the first 4 involve a power dynamic where one person in that relationship has more power over the other person in that relationship, this 5th fundamental relationship is actually equal, on an equal setting. Okay, so a contrast between those. And so it's important that you have this in your notes, or that you note this in your notes, that when each person lives up to their role, society is stable and peaceful. So Confucianism supports the powers that be. The government is going to be very fond of Confucianism because Confucianism supports the government by telling people, hey, don't rebel. Just be happy with what you've got. Do what you're supposed to do and keep your head down. So that's Confucianism, which is the biggest continuity in Chinese history, but we would be remiss if we did not talk about Taoism, and whether it's spelled with a D or a T, it's the same thing, just different spellings, same thing. You may not be familiar with the word Taoism, but I bet you're very familiar with the yin and the yang symbol. All right, this one I added in with the cats just because, hey, why not? I think it's super cute. So Taoism began during the Zhou dynasty. Okay, one of the early dynasties in China that we're going to discuss in the next PowerPoint. Under Lao Tzu, or the Great Master, we see the beginning of Taoism, where he collects his teachings in a book known as Tao Te Ching, the Classic Way, and Virtue. So the Tao is the way, or the path towards what? Happiness and wisdom. And this is going to bother me if I don't fix it. I'm missing. There we go. Okay, so the path towards happiness and wisdom. How do you get to that path? How do you be happy and wise? Well, that would involve harmony with nature, balance in nature. You can't have too much or too little of something, including in your emotions or your personality. So yin represents humanity's feminine, submissive side, and yang represents the aggressive and the masculine side. But you'll notice that neither side, male or female, dominates the other. The male side has to have a little bit of female side. The female side has to have a little bit of male characteristics in order for it to be perfectly balanced. Otherwise, you don't have harmony with nature, and thus you cannot find happiness and wisdom. And so this connection to natural forces and the land is going to make Taoism very appealing to peasants and farmers. Okay, so yeah, natural forces, animism, and the land. Peasants tend to work the land, so there's that connection. But also the more scholarly side of society, like the doctors, poets, scholars, and architects, they're going to be very interested in this as well. Is it going to be nearly as popular as Confucianism and Buddhism? Nope. But it's still something that you should be aware of. Now, both of those, Taoism and Confucianism, seem like pretty fun, easy, nice philosophies. You know, treat others as you want to be treated. That's usually a good rule. Or harmony in nature. Yeah, let's get some balance or whatever. Legalism, going to be very, very different. Okay, legalism doesn't focus so much on philosophy or the meaning of life or book smarts or nature. It's very, very heavily focused on the behavior of humans. Essentially, legalism is follow the law or else. What does that mean? Very, very strict, very many punishments for when people don't follow the law, when they don't follow the law. That's the or else, the threat that we see there. It's kind of like when your parent says, okay, I'm going to count to 3. Okay, do they ever get to 3? No, because you know better. There is an or else attached to the end of that command. If you don't do this, something bad is going to happen. Now, the basic tenets or beliefs of legalism include that human nature is inherently bad. Humans are just bad. We need something to control our terrible, terrible impulses. Okay, so very, very pessimistic when it comes to human nature. Society needs strict laws and strict punishments in order to remain peaceful. Okay, so we need to punish people for their wrongdoing. Education, not that important. Okay, under legalism, which is going to be very, very popular in the Qin dynasty, spelled Q-I-N, Qin, Q-I-N, Education's not going to be important. You have two roles in society under legalism. You can either be a soldier or you can be a farmer. You can fight for your country or you can grow food for your country or your kingdom or your empire. Okay, not a lot of need for education there. Teachers and merchants and poets and artists, that's not something that's going to be very popular under legalism. In fact, you're going to see a lot of scholars and authors burned alive or buried alive because of the Qin dynasty's resistance to education and how they basically just wanted very strict laws and punishments, and everyone should be a soldier or a farmer. So that's going to lead to a very, very short-lived dynasty under the Qin, because you can only treat people like that for so long before they start thinking, maybe we should rebel and get different management in here. Also, it focused on family. So you remember Confucianism said that the family is the most important unit in society. Well, under legalism, they claimed that it was the responsibility of the family to snitch on people who were breaking the rules, even if it was your own family member that was breaking the rules. So let's say you see your auntie break a rule. Then it's your job as a citizen to go and snitch on her to the authorities. Now, clearly, that is not always going to work out that way, but that was the premise under legalism. Family is important, yeah, under Confucianism, but under legalism, you know what's more important? Strict laws and punishments, rather than respecting your elders or respecting other members of your family that are older or of a different gender of yours. Your loyalty should be to the government entirely and to the laws of the government under legalism. So this is not a very popular philosophy, as you can probably see why. So the end of legalism is going to be a result of pushback against the strictness and the harshness of the Qin dynasty, again spelled Q-I-N, against any dissidents, against anybody who resists their strict laws. Okay, so while legalism is going to be popular in the Qin dynasty, remember the Qin dynasty doesn't really last that long, and so once the Qin emperor dies, you're going to see that the Qin dynasty dies out, and thus the need for legalism is going to die out. So once the Qin dynasty dies out, we have the development of the Han dynasty, H-A-N. That's going to lead to more stability. That means they don't have a need for legalism. And so of these three philosophies, Confucianism and Taoism have the biggest impact, have the biggest historical significance when we look at all of Chinese history. Okay? But we do need to discuss legalism because it is going to have an impact on the fall of the Qin dynasty, Q-I-N, as well as the Sui dynasty, S-U-I. Because both the Qin dynasty and the Sui dynasty, Q-I-N and S-U-I, because of their adherence to legalism, you're going to see that they're very unpopular, and thus they do not last very long. And that's the end of this lecture. I will see you for lecture number 2.